On a cold morning in the year 1325, when the mist still clung to the dilapidated thatched roofs, a young man named Tomas awoke in his cramped wooden house. Unlike the tales of splendid knights or magnificent castles that people often dreamed of, Tomas's life appeared as a rough picture, filled with foul odors and terrifying mysteries. Tomas's bed was not a silk mattress or a soft cotton pad, but merely a pile of rotten, moldy straw lying directly on the cold ground. The straw had once been food for the animals in the barn. Now it became the only bed for Tomas and his family to huddle through the night. The air inside the small house was barely enough to contain 4 people, a few skinny dogs, and countless bugs, mites, and cockroaches crawling in every crack of the rotten wooden walls. The pungent stench made even breathing a torture. The house's wall had no windows, only a rickety wooden door through which cold drafts rushed in, making Tomas shiver every night. The room was a single space where everyone lived, ate, slept, including pets and uninvited guests, insects, rats, and even some mysterious creatures whose faint hissing could only be heard at night. At 22 years old, Tomas was considered middle-aged by others since the average lifespan then was very low. The aches and pains in his joints, the small wounds from hard labor that never healed, and the diseases lurking daily like dark ghosts weighed heavily on Tomas. He wondered if life could be brighter or if this was the fate everyone had to endure. Not only was there a lack of material wealth, but Tomas also clearly felt the absence of privacy in daily life. The tiny room allowed no personal space. Every word, every gesture was heard, every action was monitored by family members, and even by the animals living in the house. There was no distance, no shielding, just a suffocating crampedness that seemed to crush the human soul along with it. One night, when the fire in the kitchen had just died out, Tomas heard strange sounds coming from the dark corner of the house. The faint hissing resembled whispers of ancient ghosts, making the already heavy atmosphere even more oppressive and mysterious. Tomas trembled, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness without daring to move. Was it the souls of those who had lived and died in this miserable place, or some monster lurking, waiting for the chance to tear apart his fragile life? The story of Tomas and the harsh life of the medieval people is not about brave knights or glittering castles. It is the story of small humans enduring in darkness, in foul smells, in filth, and in the terrible loneliness of deprivation. Yet from those shadows, strange mysteries and astonishing resilience arose, lighting a fragile hope in Tomas's soul and countless generations of poor people. Sanitation was extremely poor. No toilets, people defecated into buckets inside the house and then emptied them onto the streets. There was a custom to shout "Gardaloo" to warn passersby. Public latrines were cramped. Without toilet paper, people used leaves, straw, moss, or even bare hands to clean. Brothels also used primitive hole toilets draining into ditches or open canals, very unsanitary and vulnerable to enemy attacks. Using the toilet was a dangerous, unhygienic, and shameful challenge. Alongside the cramped, filthy, and foul-smelling conditions in Tomas's wooden house, another secret about medieval life makes many shudder to think of: sanitation. A dangerous challenge few dared to mention. There were no toilets in the small houses. Everyone had to use a special bucket inside, then wait to empty it directly onto the filthy street. Whenever someone needed to defecate, they had to shout loudly, "Gardaloo!" a special warning, to alert people below on the street to quickly move aside and avoid being suddenly attacked by the waste just dumped. This call echoed through narrow alleys, becoming a strange and haunting daily chorus in town life. The rare public latrines that existed were so cramped that no one wanted to stay inside too long. In the dark rooms, there was no toilet paper. People had to use leaves, dry straw, green moss, or even bare hands to clean themselves. The feeling of filth and shame surged with every step inside, causing many to wait until the last minute before daring to enter. Many terrifying stories told of users being caught or even teased in public latrines, making them even more horrified than the unsanitary conditions. Brothels, places thought of as luxurious or entertaining, were no exception to horrific, unsanitary conditions. The toilets there were merely holes dug straight down into water moats or open drains below, causing all waste to float or emit a strong, foul stench. More dangerously, these open drains could be exploited by enemies to attack or spy, creating a mysterious and terrifying threat for the women and clients there. Many nights, strange noises coming from the brothel area startled people awake, unsure if they were caused by criminals or vengeful spirits. Using the toilet in the Middle Ages was not merely a biological need, but a dangerous and humiliating battle. Thomas once witnessed a young man attacked by a gang while trying to relieve himself outdoors late at night. The screams and sounds of clashes echoed through the air, causing chaos in the neighborhood. Residents dared not intervene for fear of being caught in the violent turmoil. Moreover, rampant unsanitary conditions were the root cause of many vicious diseases, malaria, diarrhea, and cholera, that weakened bodies and pushed many to tragic deaths. Thomas knew that just one misstep or skin injury could lead to infection, and there was no medicine to help. The fear, mystery, and horror surrounding the act of relieving oneself were not simple. It became an inseparable part of life, a silent ghost haunting everyone every moment. Thomas had heard rumors of monsters appearing in water drains, ghosts of those who died from diseases, or even dark forces silently challenging the fragile existence of humans. Amid the dense darkness and terrible stench, Thomas faced a daily challenge: how to survive, how to keep a bit of hygiene and dignity in a world not meant for cleanliness, safety, or privacy. These seemingly small details contributed to a vivid, curious, mysterious, and thrilling picture of medieval life, a life where survival and death were as fragilely close as the rotting straw beneath his feet. Breakfast was unappetizing, usually pottage, a thick soup made from grains and vegetables, cooked and recooked for many days. Bread was as hard as stone, sometimes mixed with sawdust or bark. Drinks were weak beer because water was often contaminated. Even children drank beer. Meat, cheese, and fresh fruit were luxuries. Only kings used expensive spices like pepper and cinnamon. Thomas's small kitchen, located next to the old wooden house where he lived with his family, was never a place of joy or warmth like the stories told about medieval life. Every morning, Thomas faced a meal that was a harsh, mysterious trial soaked in hardship. Thomas's breakfast was usually a murky bowl of pottage, a thick soup made from grains and vegetables harvested from the barren lands around the village. The terrifying thing was that the pottage was not fresh, but had been cooked and recooked for many days. He had heard village old women whispering that some had seen tiny creatures, possibly insect eggs or strange microorganisms, hidden in every spoonful, ready to crawl into the eater's stomach. Thomas dared not look closely for fear that if he saw it, he would lose the courage to eat. Alongside the pottage was bread, but don't think bread was a savior for Thomas. Village bread was as hard as stone, sometimes mixed with sawdust or bark to increase weight. Thomas vividly remembered the first time he bit into that bread. His jaw felt like it would shatter. The sharp pain made him choke back tears. Once he secretly blew dust off a piece, hoping it would be a bit less hard, but it was useless. Thomas's drink was not fresh water because the village's water sources were usually polluted with waste and untreated sewage. The villagers had long passed down that drinking water directly could cause disease, even quick death. Therefore, Thomas and everyone usually drank a type of weak beer, a strange beverage made from fermented grains, low in alcohol but enough to quench thirst and, rumor had it, help kill some bacteria in the water. What surprised Thomas was that even the children in the village were given this beer from a very young age, like a secret remedy. Meat, cheese, and fresh fruit were luxuries for Thomas, almost never appearing on his family's dining table. He had heard curious stories from passing merchants about the lavish feasts of kings, where dishes were intricately decorated, fragrant with expensive spices like pepper and cinnamon, things commoners never knew. Thomas wondered if a different world really existed out there, where people enjoyed flavors and colors he only dreamed of. Once, while herding pigs at the village edge, Thomas accidentally saw a stranger hiding in the shadows, exchanging small bags containing strange powders and seeds. The stranger whispered mysteriously about a spice called the gold of the East, said to transform a murky soup into an exquisite dish, but its price was so high that only kings and the wealthy dared to use it. Thomas felt a strange curiosity rise inside him, unable to take his eyes off the stranger. That was the first time Thomas realized that life beyond the village held many unexplored secrets, and things seemingly ordinary contained sparkling fragments of luxury and power. Tomas began to wonder if one day he could escape this bland, rigid, and challenging meal. Could he find a way to once enjoy fresh meat or a sweet fruit? But then he remembered the harsh reality. To have such food, one must overcome countless dangers, diseases, and the harsh class divisions of medieval society. All these things not only made Tomas's breakfast dull and hard to swallow, but also hid a world full of mysteries, dangers, and thrills, a world where life and death intertwined, where every bite was a struggle to survive amid poverty and destitution. Thus, each of Tomas's meals not only nourished his body, but also deeply imprinted the dark, mysterious, and curious life of the Middle Ages. The only clothing was a rough tunic, worn for many months or years unwashed, prone to mold. Most went barefoot, skin itchy from fleas, lice, bedbugs, all living on everyone's bodies. Personal hygiene was extremely poor, no toothbrushes, severe dental decay. Besides the challenges of meals, personal hygiene, and cramped living, Tomas faced another silent pain. His only clothing, a rough, worn tunic, worn thin over many months, possibly years. The tunic was never washed as we understand it today. The musty smell, the stench from sweat and dirt clung tightly, making every time he put it on a painful reminder of poverty and helplessness in life. Small tears on the tunic were not patched or repaired, but slowly spread over the years like lingering wounds on Tomas's body. He knew the longer it went unwashed, the more mold it would breed, and it became a refuge for fleas and lice, the disgusting parasites that had become unavoidable companions in daily life. No one in the village could afford new clothes, so most people had to wear the same outfit repeatedly, no matter how itchy or uncomfortable it was. Tomas had felt fleas biting his skin, causing unbearable itching that made him scratch until it bled. But physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation of seeing others around him sharing the same misery, like filthy zombies isolated by the darkness of the era. Most villagers went barefoot, without shoes or sandals to protect their feet. Tomas's feet were full of scratches and rashes, partly from thorns on the paths and partly from constant attacks by fleas and bedbugs. These bugs lived parasitically on the body, crawling through clothing seams, hairlines, laying eggs, and growing, making scratching a never-ending act. Tomas had heard old women in the village tell eerie stories about how these bugs could transmit diseases or even drive people mad. He felt a mixture of curiosity and fear thinking about these tiny creatures. Could they really be little demons lurking around each villager? Personal hygiene was the most neglected topic in that dark life. Tomas never knew about toothbrushes or toothpaste, things that today seem essential. His teeth were badly decayed, with blackened, broken teeth, making every meal a dull, constant pain. The bad breath also made Tomas avoid close contact with others, because he knew no one wanted to come near with that unpleasant smell. Many nights, Tomas woke up from sharp toothaches. The firelight in the kitchen was not enough to warm or heal him. He heard his mother's sighs and mysterious whispers from neighbors about a healer who could cure tooth problems, but to see him required money his family did not have. Tomas felt trapped in a maze with no escape, where each problem led to a chain of pain, disease, and indescribable shame. These silent pains, the tattered clothes, the lice bites, the rotten teeth, created a mysterious and haunting veil over Tomas's life. It was not only terrible living conditions, but also evidence of the fragile existence of humans in medieval society, where poverty and disease were silent enemies not easily defeated. From the dust on the old tunic, to the wounds from flea bites, from bare feet covered with scratches and thorns, to the aching, incurable teeth, all told a curious, thrilling, and mysterious story about a dark era that Tomas and ordinary villagers had to survive day by day, hour by hour. Oral hygiene was almost non-existent. Cavities and tics were normal. Both poor and rich suffered from tooth decay, sometimes having to pull teeth themselves without anesthesia or antibiotics. Barbers also acted as dentists, using iron hooks to pull teeth, which was very dangerous. Bad breath made social life even harsher. Tomas had heard whispers in the village about a terrible disease that no one could escape, cavities and the tormenting toothaches. In the Middle Ages, oral hygiene was almost a non-existent luxury. Whether rich or poor, everyone faced blackened, swollen, and persistent painful teeth. Tomas witnessed villagers having to pull out their own teeth when the pain became unbearable, without any anesthetics or antibiotics like today. Those scenes made him shudder. A man biting down hard, hands trembling as he grabbed a rough iron hook, then suddenly yanking out a rotten tooth from his jaw with no painkillers at all. The screams of pain echoed through the street, making everyone hold their breath. No one dared to intervene, because if careless, the iron hook could injure the gums or even cause deadly infections. Barbers in the village doubled as dentists, but not everyone had the skill or courage to do this work. Tomas heard stories about a barber named Gregor, rumored to be able to pull teeth within seconds, but once, due to carelessness, caused a customer to bleed so much they nearly died. These stories were told over and over in fear, becoming a terrifying mystery of the village. Bad breath became a daily obsession, not only for Tomas, but for the entire community. That unpleasant smell was like an alarm sign, causing people to avoid each other in meetings, making an already harsh social life even colder and more isolated. Tomas even felt that distance within his own family when he tried to talk. Relatives appeared uncomfortable or stepped back, unable to tolerate the smell from his breath. Tomas wondered if there was any way to escape that obsession. But in medieval society, where simple things like toothbrushes or painkillers were unknown, maintaining oral hygiene was unimaginable. That helplessness added to the thrill and mystery of the dark life Tomas and others lived, where physical pain and social isolation intertwined like an unbreakable curse. Hard work. 90% of the population were farmers, working from dawn till dusk, no weekends off, using primitive tools. Women both worked in the fields and cared for the house and children, often getting flea infestations from their husbands. Children started working from age 5 with no school or toys. Tomas had never known true rest. His life was tied to the heavy farm labor that most villagers endured. 90% of the population were farmers, from before sunrise until darkness covered the fields. They never rested a moment. No weekends off, no holidays or moments of relaxation like in the lavish stories Tomas had heard. Everything was labor, exhaustion, and clinging to every grain of rice to survive. The tools they used were so primitive they made people shudder. Hoes and sickles made from scrap iron, not sharp, often causing bleeding and pain to their hands and feet. Tomas witnessed times when his hands were pierced by sharp grass thorns or blistered from holding tools too long without protective gloves. Every day, those small wounds could become infected, threatening life when medicine was a luxury. Women in the village, like Tomas's mother, bore double burdens. They not only worked in the fields, but also cared for the home, cooked, cleaned, and raised children. Tomas's mother often had red, scratched marks from flea bites, mostly transmitted from their husbands. Thin, exhausted men who worked hard, constantly exposed to damp, bug-infested soil. Tomas's heart ached whenever he saw his mother scratching until she bled. Children in the village, including Tomas, started working in the fields from as young as 5. There was no school, no toys, or carefree games. Their lives began with early mornings waking up holding small tools, going to the cold fields with their parents. Tomas remembered afternoons when he was too small to hold a sickle, standing and watching the adults work hard, yearning to escape the confinement and to know another world, a world where children could play, learn, and not be forced to grow up too soon. Some nights, when the cold wind blew through the thatched roof, Tomas quietly listened to his parents' tired sighs, whispered stories of hard work days, hidden diseases, and the silent threats from fleas and bedbugs. Each time he heard this, a mixture of curiosity and fear arose in Tomas. Was there a way to escape this cruel cycle? Could there be another future where people would not have to work themselves to exhaustion just to survive? Stories of distant lands where the wealthy lived in magnificent castles with modern tools and leisurely lives seemed like a mysterious miracle that Tomas could only dream about. But amid the filthy, suffocating reality full of fleas, bedbugs, and endless manual labor, the thrill and mystery of life made each day feel like a fight for survival. Tomas understood that, in that harsh medieval society, no one was allowed to rest, no one was permitted to be weak. Every step on the field, every drop of sweat falling marked the resilience, endurance, and silent hope of the small people amid seemingly endless challenges. The harsh weather, freezing cold winters, houses wide open, no heating, hot, oppressive summers, many flies and mosquitoes, no fans or sunscreen. Every season was uncomfortable. clothes always itchy, food bad. Tomas was familiar with the harsh changes of nature that no one in the village could avoid. Winter came. The biting cold was like an invisible monster swallowing every corner of the small village. The wooden houses were rickety, with no sealed windows, only wide open gaps, letting cold winds howl through cracks straight into the house. The fire in the kitchen was not strong enough to warm the whole body, forcing Tomas and his family to huddle in rough, damp clothes, shivering so much that their lips turned pale. One winter night, Tomas woke up because he felt his hands and feet were freezing numb. He quietly looked around the small room in the flickering firelight, seeing his mother wrapping a thin, torn blanket for him. But that blanket was just like a thin sheet of paper before the destructive cold. Tomas wondered, how could people survive such harsh winters when nothing protected them from deadly cold? Summer was not a relief, but another nightmare. The scorching heat flooded the air, making it suffocating and stifling to the point Tomas felt as if being burnt alive. Flies and mosquitoes swarmed like tiny monsters uninvited, buzzing around heads, biting and tearing at the bare skin of everyone. Without fans, sunscreen, or modern protection, villagers only knew to wrap their clothes tightly and shield themselves roughly to endure the burning sun. Tomas had heard horror stories about people who got fevers, rashes, or mosquito-borne diseases, making them so weak they could not stand up. In that heat, Tomas clearly felt the constant discomfort of rough clothes on his body. The tunic was old, stuck with sweat and dust, itchy to the point he could not stop scratching. Red scratch marks on the skin were like signs of the dark life Tomas and the villagers had to endure. Just a light scratch could cause a small wound, opening the door for disease to invade. The discomfort did not stop at the clothes, but spread to every daily meal. Thick and old pottage, bread hard as stone, drinks were light beer instead of water, all created a chain of suffocating, tiring, and hopeless feelings in Tomas's life. Every season was like that, whether freezing cold or burning hot. Life kept spinning in the whirlpool of suffering and challenge. But between the cold winter and stifling summer, Tomas always carried a burning curiosity about the world beyond the fields and his small village. He wondered if there was a place where people did not have to struggle with such harsh conditions, where clothes did not cause itching, food did not spoil, and one could live without fearing flies and mosquitoes. On long, cold nights, Tomas heard the wind whistling through cracks in the doors, heard eerie insects echoing somewhere in the darkness, and in his heart arose mysterious and thrilling questions about life, fate, and unknown things waiting for him out there. Tomas's life was not just a story of survival between cold and heat, but a journey to discover wonders and untold mysteries within the dark picture of the Middle Ages. Drinking water was extremely polluted due to human waste disposal on streets and water sources. People often drank beer because clean water was scarce and dangerous. Bathing was rarely done because people believed bathing would open pores and let diseases enter the body. Public baths were considered places of immorality and banned by the church. Amid the dark picture of Tomas's life, one thing always haunted him was the water source. The water villagers had to use for drinking, cooking, and daily living. The water was not pure as the stories about pure springs he had heard in fairy tales. Instead, it was murky, blackened, polluted by waste and human feces, carelessly dumped into streets and ditches around the village. Tomas had seen buckets of wastewater poured directly into small drains in front of houses, where the fast-flowing water mixed with rainwater. The foul smell struck his nose, forcing him to hold his breath and turn away. The village water was not only polluted, but also an invisible enemy, silently spreading disease and death to everyone. To avoid drinking contaminated water, the villagers, including children like Tomas, switched to drinking mild beer instead of plain water. This type of beer, though just a simple fermented grain beverage, became a strange kind of medicine that helped them avoid some of the dangerous diseases from dirty water sources. Tomas remembered the first time he drank that strong beer. The strange flavor made him both curious and relieved not to have to taste the black, filthy liquid everyone still called clean water. However, bathing was a different matter full of mystery and controversy. The villagers, influenced by ancient teachings and beliefs, thought that frequent bathing would open pores wide, making it easy for diseases to enter the body. Therefore, they limited bathing to only when truly necessary or on special occasions, and even then it was very superficial and quick. The public bathhouse, something Thomas had heard about from passing merchants, carried a notorious and licentious reputation. The church forbade the use of public baths, considering them places full of sin, impurity, and all-night pleasures of lust. Thomas was unsure about the truth of these stories, but the whispers about secret gatherings, shady glances, and furtive figures appearing late at night in these baths made him both curious and fearful. Many times when night fell, Thomas secretly followed the silhouettes of adults in the village, leaving their homes, hastening toward the public bathhouse. He didn't know what they did there, but their eyes were full of meaning and somewhat worried, as if they were hiding a terrible secret known only to those daring enough to venture. Amid the daily suffocation of life, polluted drinking water, limited bathing, and fear of illness, Thomas clearly felt the mystery and thrill lurking beside him. He wondered if one day the villagers would break free from this vicious cycle, find a source of clean water, and live a life without fearing disease from things as simple as drinking water or caring for the body. Thomas looked toward the distant horizon, where the misty mountains seemed to hide another world full of mysteries and opportunities. That was where he nurtured unspoken dreams, unsolved secrets, and journeys not yet begun within the gloomy but curious, mysterious, and thrilling canvas of the Middle Ages. Medicine at that time was torture disguised as healing. Diseases were caused by imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Treatment mainly involved bloodletting, leech therapy, purging, and prayer. Surgery was painful without anesthesia, and tools were unsterilized. Even mild illnesses could lead to death due to infection, as there were no antibiotics. On dark and cold nights, when Thomas curled up in the shaky wooden house, he couldn't stop thinking about the mystery and horror of medieval medicine, a world where disease was not only a threat but also a form of torture under the name of healing. The villagers believed diseases came from an imbalance of four mystical humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Thomas heard explanations from healers as they lit candles in pitch-black rooms, speaking about the need to rebalance those four humors by strange and painful methods. He didn't fully understand, but his mix of curiosity and fear made him watch every action of the sick. The most common treatment was bloodletting, a ritual both terrifying and dangerous. Thomas once witnessed a man in the village tied tightly to a chair while a healer used a sharp knife to cut his arm, letting blood flow like a stream. Not stopping there, leeches were placed on the wound to suck the patient's blood, making Thomas's hair stand on end as he watched the tiny creatures bite deep into flesh. The hissing of leeches, combined with the patient's moans, made the surrounding space suffocating and haunting. Taking purgatives and praying were also strictly applied. Thomas saw sick people forced to drink bitter mixtures, causing painful abdominal cramps. The strong herbal smell and long sighs deepened the gloomy atmosphere of the small healer's house. Surgery, a word Thomas never thought he would dare touch, was truly a horrific torment. Without anesthesia or any painkillers, patients were tied down, writhing in pain as healers cut and stitched with unsterilized instruments. He heard stories about even the simplest surgeries, like removing a wood splinter embedded in flesh, could cause fatal infections. People did not know about antibiotics or modern sterilization techniques, so even a small wound could become a death sentence. Thomas once witnessed a young neighbor having a part of infected flesh cut off without a drop of painkiller. The screams of agony echoed throughout the village, frightening everyone. Many never survived because they could not endure the pain and the spreading disease after those crude surgeries. The mystery and thrill of medieval medicine lay not only in its bizarre healing methods, but also in the sudden deaths that could strike at any moment, whether from minor or severe illnesses. Thomas clearly felt that in a poor society, disease was an uncontrollable force, a silent ghost threatening the fragile life of every person. Amid stormy days, when Thomas heard thunder echoing in the sky, a relentless curiosity surged within him. Would this world ever escape the darkness of disease and pain? Were there any miracles waiting for humanity to discover, to change the fate of countless lives suffering in this dark era? These thoughts crept into Tomas's mind like small fires burning quietly, warming and lighting up a cold and mysterious medieval world. Food was unsafe and poorly preserved. Meat and bread were often contaminated, sometimes mixed with dirt, sawdust, and bark. Poisonous mushrooms causing hallucinations and death were also found in bread. Vegetables were seasonal. Turnips were available all year round. He was too familiar with meager meals full of hazards in the dark medieval life. But what chilled him the most was that food was not only poor, but also extremely unsafe, the seed of countless mysteries and disasters lurking to trap the villagers. The meat that Tomas and his family occasionally had on their table was far from the fresh delicacies told in stories of royal banquets. Many times he saw pieces of meat that had begun to change color, smelled rotten, and were covered in bacteria. More terrifying was that meat was often mixed with dirt, sawdust, bark, or other impurities to increase weight, making each bite both dry and hard while containing deadly hazards. Bread, the supposed salvation in scarce meals, was also part of this dark story. Hard as stone, the loaves not only contained dirt and wood splinters, but could also hide notorious poisonous mushrooms. Tomas had heard adults in the village whisper about people who experienced hallucinations, convulsions, and even mysterious deaths after eating bread contaminated with such poisonous fungi. The moldy smell and bitter taste lingering on the bread gave Tomas an indescribable worry whenever he touched those crumbs. Vegetables in the village were neither abundant nor safe. They were harvested seasonally, without pesticides or any modern preservation methods. Turnips, the only crop grown year-round, were what Tomas and his family relied on to supplement nutrition during hard times. Yet, even these turnips were sometimes infested with worms, spoiled, and could cause stomach aches or mild poisoning. Tomas couldn't help but wonder how people managed to survive in a world full of such dangerous food. He wondered if those toxins were the cause of the mysterious illnesses spreading in the village, of the sudden deaths adults often mentioned but no one dared explain clearly. Once, Tomas witnessed a child in the village convulsing after eating a piece of moldy bread. The screams echoed throughout the village, causing chaos. But instead of medical care, the child was taken out of the village and left to fate, like a terrifying mystery no one wanted to touch. The dangers of unsafe food were not only Tomas's worry, but a dark ghost haunting everyone. It made life, already hard, even more suffocating and thrilling, like a never-ending battle between humans and the invisible dangers in every bite. In Tomas's eyes, mixed with curiosity and fear, food was not just a source of life, but also horrible mysteries, fierce challenges he had to overcome daily. Those meals, simple to the point of cruelty, were still a bridge between Tomas's hard life and the mysterious world full of unknowns waiting ahead in the dark Middle Ages. Religion controlled all life, governing laws, education, rituals, and holidays. The church strictly forbade many things, required attendance at Mass, fasting, and forbade doubting the church. Worshipping against the church or opposing it was punishable by severe penalties. In the dark and gloomy world where Tomas lived, an invisible but tremendously powerful force controlled every aspect of human life. That was religion. The church was not just a place for prayer, but the true master of laws, education, rituals, and even holidays throughout the year. Everyone in the village, including Tomas, had to live under the strict supervision and control of the church. The church issued strict regulations requiring villagers to attend Mass regularly every week, with no absence allowed for any reason. Tomas had seen those who violated even once being looked at suspiciously by the clergy and severely punished as a terrifying warning to everyone. Not only attending Mass, the people also had to obey strict fasting rules on special holy days, giving up delicious foods even for a moment, just to show absolute submission. The church's control did not stop there. Tomas heard mysterious rumors that the church strictly forbade any worship outside the official doctrine. Any sign of difference, of personal belief or doubt, was considered a serious sin. Those found opposing the church could be arrested, interrogated, and even sentenced to death in obscure and brutal trials. Stories about heretics, people suspected of worshiping demons or rebelling, always made Tomas shiver. He had heard of a woman in the neighboring village who was arrested on suspicion of performing mystical rites, then taken to a dark prison under the church tower, where cries and pleas were silenced in the cold darkness. The mystery surrounding her fate made the whole village silently terrified, and no one dared to mention her. The atmosphere in the village was always heavy under the invisible surveillance of the church. Every word, every action had to be cautious, for any sign of suspicion or resistance could lead to serious consequences. Tomas clearly felt that oppression through the eyes of the elders, those who dared not speak the truth or express their secret thoughts. However, within Tomas burned a flicker of curiosity, a desire to discover the secrets hidden beneath the shell of morality and ritual. He wondered if everything the church taught was the truth, or if there were other truths hidden. Untold stories that only those who dared to face them could uncover. At night, Tomas secretly went out, walking along the narrow paths around the church, where the dim candlelight flickered, reflecting the silhouette of the clergy. He heard whispers of prayers mingled with hurried footsteps and strange, unexplained sounds. Was it beneath that tower in secret rooms that secrets unknown to ordinary people took place? Strange rituals, silent meetings, or shocking conspiracies? That mysterious and thrilling feeling not only frightened Tomas, but also stimulated his relentless curiosity. Tomas began to dream of a day when he could unveil the powerful religious veil to see the truth hidden beneath the sacred disguise, to learn about the real world beyond strict rules and overwhelming fear. In the dark life, full of oppression and control of the Middle Ages, religion was not only a whip binding people into rules, but also a mysterious door, stimulating curiosity and exploration, while creating fears and thrilling stories. Tomas faced daily. Life for women was extremely harsh. Early marriage, multiple childbirths, obedience to husbands, easily accused of witchcraft and executed. Death in childbirth was very high, with no modern medical care. Women had no right to education, were strongly oppressed in society. Tomas looked at his mother with both pity and fear. The lives of the women in the village, like his mother, were intertwined with unspoken challenges and sufferings. They married very young, often before fully understanding the world, and had to bear the burden of continuous childbirth without rest. Tomas's mother had gone through many pregnancies and deliveries, each filled with relentless fear because the death rate in childbirth was a nightmare impossible to avoid. Without modern medical knowledge, without professional doctors or clean operating rooms, every childbirth was a life or death battle. Tomas had heard the screams of pain, the times his mother writhed and agonized through the night, with only a few women in the village silently beside her, trying to help with ancient herbal remedies and prayers, begging the spirits. Each time he felt his heart tighten, overwhelmed with helplessness. Women in the village were not only oppressed by survival challenges, but also placed in a society full of control and harsh prejudices. They were not allowed to study, had no right to speak up. Every big or small decision in their lives was made by their husband or the men in the family. Tomas had witnessed women silently bowing their heads before their husband's strictness, knowing that such obedience could make them endure all kinds of harm. That harshness was further intensified by fears colored with superstition. Any woman who acted or spoke unusually was considered to show signs of witchcraft, a terrible sin in the eyes of the church and the community. Tomas had heard terrifying stories about women labeled witches, arrested, interrogated, and brutally executed. Those cases were always kept secret, but whispers and fearful looks spread throughout the village, creating a suffocating and frightening atmosphere. Once, Tomas saw his cousin being led through the village, accused of using witchcraft to harm others simply because she dared to ask unusual questions and refused to submit to harsh rules. He felt the coldness, the despair in her eyes as she passed through the silent crowd who sometimes whispered curses. The life of women in medieval society, under the heavy shadow of oppression and prejudice, was a dark picture full of mystery, pain, and drama. Tomas could not stop wondering if one day women like his mother and cousin could live freer lives, no longer fearing death in childbirth, no longer bound by social prejudices and harshness, and whether this world could change to welcome the voices forgotten, the desires extinguished in the dark gloom of the Middle Ages. Violence was everywhere. Laws were harsh, punishments brutal, Trials often involved torture or foolish ordeals such as dunking in water or putting a hand into boiling water. Beating wives and children was accepted. War and conflict were constant. Tomas could not avoid witnessing the cruelty and violence reigning everywhere like a wild beast that never ceased. The law was not a place to protect justice, but a harsh iron tool used to maintain power and fear in society. Every crime was punished with horrifyingly painful methods, haunting Tomas for many nights, making him unable to sleep. Trials did not take place in solemn courtrooms, but often in the village square, where people gathered to witness public torture as a violent spectacle. Tomas once saw a man arrested for theft, tied hand and foot, then repeatedly dunked into icy water, a form of torture called the water test. People believed that if the accused floated, he was innocent. If he sank, he was guilty. Tomas could not understand this foolishness, but the man's fear silenced the entire square. Other punishments were no less brutal, placing a hand into boiling water, being beaten brutally until bones broke, or having body parts cut off. The screams of pain and cries of those executed pierced Tomas's heart, filling him with horror and fear. Violence was not only in the courts, but also present inside Tomas's home. Beating wives and children was considered normal and socially accepted. Tomas witnessed his father's whippings of his mother, siblings, and himself when he was at fault. The shouting and crying inside the house never ceased, like silent knives cutting Tomas's soul every day. Beyond the internal violence in the village, continuous wars and conflicts were also unavoidable parts of life. Tomas heard horrifying stories about clashes between lords, raids, looting, and soldiers killed or horribly wounded. Each time the war drum sounded from afar, the village was engulfed in fear and anxiety. Tomas knew that any moment, peaceful life could be shattered by the devastating storms of war. Curiosity and obsession about violence and relentless cruelty made Tomas restless. He wondered if there could be a day when people no longer had to endure such physical and mental suffering, when law was no longer a tool of torture, like when violence was no longer a rule of life. But in the darkness and chaos of medieval society, Tomas could only quietly dream of better things, of a world where justice did not mean torture, and life was not threatened by violence and war. That dream, though small and fragile, was a flame burning in his soul amid the mysterious and thrilling life picture he had to live through. The average life expectancy was very low, 30 to 40 years old. Many died young due to disease, poor nutrition, work accidents, and war. Those who lived past 40 were considered special. Death from epidemics, famine, and harsh living conditions was very common. Tomas looked around his village with eyes both surprised and scared, realizing that life there was not only full of present dangers, but also determined by death so cruel it was hard to believe. The average life expectancy of people there was only between 30 and 40 years, a number that made anyone born in the village regard their fate as fragile and easily broken. You have witnessed small funerals, hurried farewells under the scorching afternoon sun, where loved ones were buried in simple graves without wreaths or formal farewells. Many people in the village died very young due to cruel diseases, poor nutrition, unable to withstand pain, or work accidents from carrying heavy labor from dawn till dusk. Tomas had heard stories about men severely injured while plowing fields, wounds untreated in time leading to quick death. War was also an unavoidable enemy. Continuous conflicts between lords took countless lives, leaving Tomas's small village devastated, filled with cries and lamentations. He still clearly remembered dark nights when the distant sound of war drums echoed, signaling an impending storm of war, making people tremble and prepare for uncertain days ahead. Those who survived beyond 40 years old were seen as special, the rare lucky ones who overcame the harsh whirlpool of life. They became elders, respected and listened to as precious treasures of knowledge about the surrounding world. Tomas looked at the old people in the village with admiration mixed with curiosity about the secret that helped them live longer in such a dangerous and difficult society. Epidemics and famine were silent, but equally ruthless enemies, constantly sweeping through the village, taking countless lives. Diseases like plague, malaria, or diarrhea caused quick and painful deaths with no medicine or effective treatment to save them. Tomas witnessed neighbors growing weak, lying exhausted in bed, then passing away one by one in silence and despair. Harsh living conditions with dilapidated houses, poor quality food, polluted water, and poor hygiene further weaken people's health, making them more vulnerable to illness. Thomas felt the fragility of life every day and every hour, when even a small wound or a slight fever could be a death sentence for anyone. However, amidst all the fear and sorrow, Thomas kept a flicker of hope in his heart. He was curious about the world beyond the village, about new healing methods, different ways of living that could help people extend their lifespan and overcome cruel fate. He constantly dreamed of a future where old age was no longer rare, where people could live healthier and happier lives. Under the gray sky of the Middle Ages, short lifespan was not just a number but a mysterious, thrilling, and eerie story about Thomas and the people around him, a world where life and death intertwined in a risky and mysterious game. Life in the Middle Ages was truly cruel, filthy, diseased, and violent. There were no basic amenities like toilets, clean water, personal hygiene, or modern medicine, poor nutrition, exhausting labor, and short lifespan. Especially for women, the pressure and dangers were even harsher. The romantic images of knights, castles, and festivals were just distant myths. The reality was a fierce daily struggle for survival,